Hi, guys. So we don't have too much time. Can everyone just sit down? Just please sit down. And then we can get started. You guys look great. You guys look great. Been a good day so far? Good. Well, welcome to our business luncheon. As she said, my name is Jordyn Rolling. I'm delighted to see you all here today at the 22nd Annual Wall Street Project Economic Summit. The theme this year is 400 years later, closing the wealth gap, expanding opportunity. And this afternoon, we gather here with you, our leaders in business, to further explore how we can come together to close the wealth gap and expand opportunities for those who have been historically left out. For decades, we've heard the rallying cry of the leader of the Rainbow Push Coalition, who has successfully helped to guide those towards opportunities, penetrating and sometimes breaking down the thick walls of oppression. The Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. has worked tirelessly challenging corporate America to end the multi-billion-dollar trade deficit with minority vendors while working to ensure equal opportunity for diverse employees, entrepreneurs, and consumers. Let's put our hands together and welcome our leader and president and founder of the Rainbow Push Coalition, the Reverend Jesse L. Jackson Sr. Where you at, Rev? Well, he'll be here shortly. Okay, let's clap again. One more time. One more time for Reverend Jesse L. Jackson.
Against those odds, the help of God and loving parents, inspiring teachers, I was able to break that cycle.
Well, I believe the future's in my hand. And I tell every boy, girl, woman, and man, if I think it, I can believe it. Created and achieved, so I am somebody. Oh, I am somebody. Oh, I am somebody.
Together, let me scream. It's such a joy to be home with you today on this tremendous occasion. I was just over across the hall talking with the chairman of the Finance Committee of the U.S. Congress, Sister Maxine. Was give her a big hand, Maxine. Chairman of my board, Ms. Jackie Jackson, give her a hand too. She's the author. They bring Maxine on in now, please. Dr. Pleasant, but you catch a later plane, man. You need to hang here today with the people. Just 1 second, friends. Would you give a real big applause when Maxine walks to the door? Give her all the applause that she deserves. She's been such a hard worker, such a freedom fighter. She did not lose her identity in Congress. And now she got power and sense at the same time. It always goes together. We're with us for my international guests, the Minister of Trade and Minister of Transportation from South Africa. Please stand. Give a big hand. Give a big hand. South Africa. Mercy, your name, your book is The Color of Money. Please give her a hand, Dr. Marani. The Color of Money. Black Wealth, give her a hand. See who else can pay for the ticket. John Adam, you stand. You sit on the free tickets, you stand. used to call them maximum waters, maximum waters. Is maximum coming? Maximum waters. Give her a big hand, Chairperson. Give her a big hand. Give her a big hand, Maximum. Put your hand together like a big, real big time. Now let me hear you scream. Be seated. Again, let us pray. Accept our petition, dear God. Thank you for sustaining us across the years. Dark nights and cold winters, and yet here we are. Slave ship to championship, here we are. From the bottom deck to the top of the deck, we thank you. For all we ask you to empower us with the courage of our convictions. Thank you for our Sister Maxine Waters today, who shall share with us from her heart and her vision. And those who thought it not robbery to come and gather today. If you find anything in us that should not be, any hatred or jealousy or malice, take it out and make us better and never bitter. See us through, amen. I want to make before we start eating this delicious chicken for the 5th time this week. If you're going to serve chicken every day, one day they see at least be Kentucky Fried or something. It's just the same chicken. Some years ago, Dr. King had been killed, and our hearts were heavy and our eyes were full of water. The Congressional Black Caucus of 13 members met at the Sheraton Hotel. We were a bit lost. We lost Dr. King April 4th and Kennedy June the 5th, or the 6th. I should never forget that night, along with Congressman Clay, on the stage walked Arthur Davis. He said, "It's not the man, it's the plan, not the rap, it's the map." That's where that came from. It was his way of saying it's not just the leader we lost. We lost that, but it's not just the man, it's the plan, not just the rap, it's the map. Where are we going? While California, while Alabama, Mississippi, and Deep South take the hits for our experience, we picked the cotton in the South. They processed it in Montgomery, but the sales market was the harbor in New York. Most of us came to the port of Charleston, South Carolina. Others came to the port of New York City. There is on the African burial ground, testimony to that. First African American church on Wall Street. At some point, they moved us to the other side of the same island, Harlem and Wall Street on the same island. Just two extremes of wealth and poverty. The back door of Wall Street is Harlem in the real sense. 400 years ago, 1619, now it's 2019. You read the 13th chapter of Exodus, 2nd verse. After 400 years, Moses said, "Remember this day." And God stuck his mighty hand in the slave and delivered you. We remember this season. We came here as slaves, as enslaved people, denied the right of our humanity. We returned today with 55 African American Congress people, chair of criminal justice, chair of oversight of Silicon Valley, chair of the finance committee. We come back 400 years later in much better shape. We're at a different place today. Board members, we've never had positions before. Kind of what does all that mean? I'm not sure. As I said to Bruce Gordon, it's all happened so fast, I'm not sure we know what it means to have a chair of a finance committee. When Maxine speaks, banks have to listen. She has oversight. When as Bernice Johnson speaks, Silicon Valley has to listen. When Bob Scott speaking, judges have to listen. We've not quite been here before, yet here we are today. To look forward by hope and not backwards by fear, and to be better and not bitter. We didn't know how good baseball could be until everybody could play. Don't know how good America can be until everybody can play, can function. We are so good, John Rogers, on the basketball court or the football field. Why are we the best at that? Don't come up with some biological reason. We're good at that, the best at it, because whenever the playing field is even, and the rules are public, and the goals are clear, referee is fair, and the score is transparent, we can make it. If on the football field, if you had to have 12 yards for a first down because you had become a broken home, 8 yards because you inherited some yards, we wouldn't do well there either. So whenever the playing field is even, 10 yards for all first downs, 6 points for all touchdowns, 3 points for all field goals. Whenever the playing field is even, rules public, goals clear, referees fair, and the score is transparent. That's the struggle. Today we're free but not equal. And what you'll hear from Sister Maximum today is about this issue of freedom, how to use our power with discipline and integrity. We're about to eat now, but I do want to express my thanks as we seek this year to review the narrative. We hear so much about 1863, how Lincoln freed us. We saved Lincoln and the Union, and he freed us. If Lincoln had not been saved, Jefferson Davis would have been in charge. We'd be speaking French today. So it's important that Lincoln freed us, but that we saved him. We were in the trenches making America the America it is today. So with heads held high and chests extended, we have a reason to rejoice. And how great America is and how great America can be. America's best days are ahead of it. So I want to express my thanks to you. And I want the waiters and waitresses, where are they? Y'all come over here right quick. I want people to see you and appreciate you. Put your hands together. Give it up for the waiters. Now, two things. Serve the chicken quickly. And next time I have at least one woman standing here with y'all. Say me too. Say me too. Put your hands together. Chicken time.
So the Rev is hungry, but we have a few things to do before we eat. Thank you, Reverend Jackson. So we also give our thanks to our many sponsors and others who believe in the mission and support our efforts. So I'm going to ask them to please come to the podium to share their remarks. I have Felicia Wasson, who's the Director of Community and Stakeholder Relations for the Coca-Cola Company. I have Bulelani Gratitude Magwanishe, Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, Republic of South Africa. And I have Roy Cho, the Vice President of Distribution and Affiliate Sales of EMCEE Networks. So they're gonna come and give us some remarks.
Over 300 years ago, just a short distance from here, enslaved Africans were imported to provide free labor to a growing New York City. Men, women, and children created an economy along the East River that they would never personally benefit from. We will never know all of their names, and although they will never know ours, it is their prayers and perseverance that allow us to sit here today. Their planted seeds would yield growing crops. The seeds that they planted grew trees, trees with strong, deep roots. Reverend Sharpton reminded us yesterday that the measure of a strong tree and whether it produces apples is judged by the depth and strength of the tree's roots. Reverend Jesse L. Jackson Sr. is that tree. For over 20 years, Reverend Jackson has called corporate America to the site of New York's slave market to ensure equal opportunities for culturally diverse employees, entrepreneurs, and consumers. As a total beverage company, the Coca-Cola Company's mission is to refresh the world in mind, body, and spirit, to inspire moments of optimism and happiness through our brands and our actions, to create value and make a difference. We offer over 500 brands in more than 200 countries and territories. With our bottling partners, we employ more than 700,000 people, helping bring economic opportunity to local communities worldwide. The Coca-Cola Foundation has given back more than $1 billion to communities worldwide since its inception in 1984. In addition to serving our hometown of Atlanta, the foundation has reached more than 655 million people, empowering communities, supporting education. Thank you, Reverend Jackson, Reverend Sharpton, today's luncheon speaker, the Honorable Maxine Waters, and the many giants in the cause for justice for working with us as partners in our efforts. We remain committed to ensuring that the seeds planted here on the East River and all around this nation yield access and opportunity for generations to come. Thank you for the honor of being here today. Please enjoy the rest of the conference.
Mr. Magwanishe, if you could come make your remarks. Yes. Please welcome him to the stage.
Reverend Jesse L. Jackson, President and founder of Rainbow Push Coalition, and members of your family, Honorable Nkosi Phathekile Holomisa, Deputy Minister of Labor of the Republic of South Africa, Dilizintab, and Ms. Holomisa, Honorable Maxine Waters, Chair of the House Financial Services Committee, Captains of Industries, leaders of government, business, and labor, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to extend very warm greetings on behalf of the people and the government of the Republic of South Africa, on whose behalf I stand before you today. Thank you. The rainbow remains one of the most natural wonders of the world. Scientists allude that it is formed from the process of refraction, which relies on the sun rays to shine through the moisture of the raindrops. This then means that a rainbow can only be formed from the power of the sun and the storm. President Nelson Mandela calls Africa and her people a rainbow nation, not only because of the privilege in her diversity, but because she managed to shine through the storms of colonialism, subjugation, and oppression. And like the rainbow, Africa stands as a natural wonder of the world, too impossible to reach the end of her potential and growth. With the above, allow me to uphold my gratitude to Reverend Jesse Jackson, alongside your ambassadors, for a strategic vision that you chose to carry. In its barrenness, you clothed it. In its emptiness, you filled it up. In a state of confusion, you provided clarity. In its vulnerability, you certainly defended this vision. It is an honor to thank you for standing with the people of South Africa, fighting against the brutality of apartheid regime, and for the continued support throughout the struggle. As a recipient of the Companion of O.R. Tambo Award, the highest award recognized by the South African government to a foreign national, Reverend Jesse Jackson and Congresswoman Maxine Waters epitomize the values of Ubuntu. That indeed a person is bettered by the deeds of others. It is evident and with certainty that their extensive efforts to help end apartheid have improved the lives of our people. Today, merely 25 years, more than 4.5 million houses have been built for the poor. More than 80% of our people have access to clean water. More than 80% of our people now have access to electricity. We have financed over 1.5 million graduates through university. 17.5 million people are getting social grants. The ANC has been able to ensure 50-50 representation of women in legislatures and in cabinet and in local authorities. A lot has been achieved and a lot still needs to be done. This is because of the support you gave us. Reverend Jesse Jackson contested Ronald Reagan in 1984 for the office of the President of the United States. That gave us hope that our own freedom was around the corner. And indeed, it happened. Throughout the 1980s, Congresswoman Waters arranged marches and rallies to protest against the regime in South Africa. Both Reverend Jackson and Congresswoman Waters led sit-ins at the US-based South African missions. Arrested for protesting against the regime, we witnessed the sacrifice of their own freedom. Furthermore, we are honored that Congresswoman Waters continues to support South Africa in addressing socio-economic disparities, such as the fight against HIV and AIDS epidemic. The contribution of Congress through the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief persists to be an initiative of strategic value to the government of South Africa. Honorable Waters, I certainly wish you well in your new appointment as a chair of the House Financial Services Committee. Your affirmation is a victory for the struggles of women across the world. Affirmation of women must not be an exception, but an acceptable norm in our society. It was also no coincidence that the founder of the African National Congress, Dr. Pislika Isama Seme, studied at Columbia University. As a result of strong relations we nurtured with W.E.B. Du Bois and Alain Locke, which played a significant role in his participation towards the Harlem Renaissance. In advancing the movement, Chief Albert Luthuli and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. also exchanged letters from prison and house arrest, and both certainly drew from the same well of wisdom. Dr. King often supported that, and I quote, "It is not about the color of our skin, but it is about the content of our character," close quote. Our currency to prosperity and excellence as a people of color is accepting our own content and further protecting it. Therefore, relations between our countries are historic, demonstrating a collective resolve to address a common developmental agenda. In the post-apartheid era, United States of America remains an important trading partner to South Africa. The US Congress extended market access for duty-free products from the sub-Saharan Africa into the United States. This transpired through the Africa Growth Opportunity Act, which enabled an increase in the trade of value-added goods. Furthermore, the US is South Africa's second largest export destination and a third source of import for our country. As we contest for liberty and economic empowerment, the South African government has channeled its mandate towards developing black pioneers engaged in industrial sectors. This has ensured access to lucrative markets and providing a platform for black African innovation to thrive. However, alliances must be fortified to further deliberate on growth strategies, continental integration, and the presence of African goods and services in global markets such as the USA. As the South African government, we are able to facilitate inward buying investment missions for companies seeking to source value-added manufactured goods and services. This also extends itself to investment made in productive sectors of the economy. It is with pride that we will be welcoming an international trade mission from the United States to South Africa in the month of August 2019. The South African government is ready to provide assistance in making the mission a success, as it happened 25 years ago when President Nelson Mandela and Senator Ted Kennedy coordinated the same mission. In advancing this mission, we stand on the shoulders of Madiba, who believe that a winner is a dreamer who never gives up. Therefore, I am well affirmed that the mission to be undertaken will equally foster strong relations and partnerships between entrepreneurs in both countries. To encourage inclusive growth across all spectrums, our Black Industrialist Program is deliberate in the advocacy of Black participation in the mainstream economy. Through this, the Black Industrialist incentives support companies pursuing productive sectors of the economy. As a champion of the program, we actively engage partnerships that empower Black entities. I therefore urge minority groups, women and the youth to leverage on the opportunities available. On the investment frontier, 800 US-based companies have invested in South Africa, also using it as a corridor to the African continent. Furthermore, South African companies also have a footprint in the United States, like Sasol. The President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, hosted the inaugural International Investment Conference in October 2018. Investment pledges to the value of $22 billion were made by local companies from America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. The main investment target as set by the President is $100 billion in the next 5 years. This is aimed towards sectors such as oil and gas, agriculture, agro-processing, financial and business process services, the oceans economy, tourism, and other industrial sectors. Additionally, South Africa continues to affirm its commitment to regional and continental trade within Africa. Once the Continental Free Trade Agreement is operational, investors and businesses will have access to a market of over 1.3 billion people with a GDP of approximately 3.3 trillion US dollars. This agreement will further permit the free movement of goods and services within the continent. In fact, from the aforementioned, South Africa provides a suite of incentives to companies investing in priority sectors. The Invest South Africa is a one-stop shop service geared towards providing investors with services to fast-track projects, further assisting them with information, facilitation, and aftercare. Thus, through the one-stop shop agency, government aims to reduce red tape areas concerning business registration, taxation, licenses, visa permit application, and other applicable services. Thus, government offers to make investment in South Africa as seamless as possible, eliminating any regulatory burdens involved. Our country remains the most industrialized and diversified economy in Africa as per global recognition. It is for this reason that we are a location of choice for multinational corporations who also desire favorable access to global markets. Therefore, I invite companies that are present to heed to President Ramaphosa's call for investment into our continent. As a coalition, let us strive to alleviate the waves of discontent pulsing through our continent. Let us strive to ensure that poverty can no longer be our language of struggle. Let us strive to ensure that inequality should no longer be a wage for war. Let us strive for a society where unemployment can no longer serve as a portion for skilled and gifted nations. Let us continue to believe in the dreams of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the one where the struggle of youth is not access to education, but selecting an institution of choice, where the struggles of a family is not the fight for bread, but rather for the wealth creation, where the promotion and growth is not based on being black or white, but rather on merit. Let us continue to believe in this dream that promises all men the unalienable right of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. In these renowned words of Dr. King, let us lament to his thoughts that as a collective must find the will to cash in this check, for indeed the Bank of Justice cannot afford to have insufficient funds, not now and not ever, close quote. Having heard your dreams, your hopes, your frustrations and aspirations, which as South Africans we share, I want to leave you with the words of a song that was written for the South African youth by Lai Cipher when he saw a white South African soldier shooting and killing a black youth in 1985. These words are relevant to all of us now as they were relevant then. He said, and I quote, "The higher you build your barriers, the taller I become. The further you take my rights away, the faster I will run. You deny me, you can decide to deny me, to turn your face away, no matter, because there's something inside so strong. I know that I can make it, though you are doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, there's something inside so strong. The more you refuse to hear my voice, the louder I will sing. You hide behind the walls of Jericho. Your lies will come tumbling. Deny any place in time. You squander my wealth that is mine. My light will shine so brightly, it will blind you because there is something inside so strong. I know I can make it. May the rainbow push continue to have something inside so strong. I thank you.
And then lastly, we have Mr. Cho.
Thank you, Reverend Jackson, to the PUSH Coalition for inviting AMC Networks to participate here today. Thank you, Congresswoman Waters, for being here and for your continued leadership in Washington, D.C. So I grew up in New Jersey, and when I was in 4th grade, my family moved from one part of New Jersey to another. And I remember being the new kid in school, walking into the lunchroom cafeteria, and the coolest kid in school, who was an Italian kid named Jason, walked up to me, and in front of everybody, he said, "Why is your face so flat?" And I was taken aback, and I did what any elementary school kid in that situation who thought of himself as somewhat of a tough guy would do, and I punched Jason in the face. We got into a fist fight. We got broken up immediately, and I went home to my parents that day, and I said, "My social life in this new town is completely over." And fast forward a few months later, I decided I wanted to try out for the wrestling team. So I remember going into the wrestling room tryouts, which is actually in the high school at the time, and the first kid I noticed is the same kid, Jason, who not only is the most popular kid at school, but he happens to be the best kid in the wrestling team. So, I ended up, as luck would have it, Jason and I were about the same size, so the coach paired us up. We both made the team, and throughout the course of that wrestling season, we became really good friends because we realized that despite our different backgrounds, we had a tremendous amount of commonality. We both were competitive, we both liked sports, we bonded over girls we were both interested in, and, and to this day, Jason happens to be one of my closest friends from home. And I tell that story with you guys today because I learned at a very young age about the importance of diversity, and more specifically, the importance of exposure to a variety of different backgrounds, faces, and cultures, because only then can we really find our commonality. So before joining AMC Networks about 2.5 years ago, I was a fan already of its programming. My favorite show at the time was Walking Dead. I don't know if we have any zombie fans in here today, but I always loved that show because the fact that there are 2 of the leads in this show were people of color. So you had Stephen Yoon, who was Asian American, and then you had Danai Gurira, who was a black woman, and of Black Panther fame, but before that of Walking Dead fame. And I always thought it was so amazing that the biggest show on television had people of color in leadership and heroic roles, and you had non-traditional faces playing roles that in the past had looked very different from faces like my own growing up. So at AMC Networks, we're really proud of our diverse programming. We're an independent programmer, but we have diverse programming. So we're proud of WeTV, Women's Entertainment, which we have some WeTV fans here. But on Thursday nights, WeTV is actually the #1 destination for African American women with programming such as Braxton Family Values and Growing Up Hip Hop. As a company, we're incredibly proud of the public service announcement that we do every year with members of the Congressional Black Caucus, encouraging members of all communities to participate in the political process and to increase civic and community engagement. And of course, commitment to diversity at any company starts at the top. So our CEO, Josh Sapan, who unfortunately cannot be here with us today, has really showed a commitment to diversity, not only in terms of hiring practices, but also in terms of diversity in programming, as I mentioned before, but also of creating a culture where diversity in the workplace is not only tolerated, but it's encouraged. So we have a very active and engaged diversity and inclusion committee at AMC Networks, the co-chairs of whom are here today. We have Grace Chung and So-On Sawyer who are here with us today. So we're very proud of our commitment to diversity in all aspects of our company's business. So I just wanted to close by thanking everyone for being here today and for the commitment to bridging the racial economic gap. And we as a company are incredibly proud to be doing our small part to increasing exposure to diverse faces, communities, and backgrounds, and doing that through the medium of storytelling. So thank you so much. Enjoy your lunch.
So I was just informed that you guys probably have no idea who I am, and you're like, why is she up there? So I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Jordyn Rolling. I'm a journalist, producer, and documentary filmmaker living here in New York City. I'm a correspondent for New York, thank you. I'm a correspondent for New York Live on NBC4. I'm also the host of Billboard News, and I'm the co-host of a show called BET Breaks for BET. So that's who I am. That's why I was asked to be here. I hope you guys are really enjoying your lunch. We're just going to move right along with the program. We're not going to take a break, so you can continue to eat while we move along. Our first awardee is no stranger in this city. The Honorable Scott M. Stringer is the Comptroller of the City of New York. Comptroller Scott M. Stringer has spent his career in public service fighting to ensure that every New Yorker has an equal opportunity to make it in our city. As investment advisor to, custodian, and trustee of the city's 5 pension funds, Mr. Stringer and his staff oversee the city's $160 billion public pension system. Over the last 2 decades, Mr. Stringer has been a champion for policies like a $15 minimum wage, whoop whoop, has advocated for affordable housing, worked to strengthen the city's fiscal health, and promoted open, transparent government. Mr. Stringer was elected to the New York State Assembly in 1992, where he represented Manhattan's West Side for 13 years. In 2006, he became Manhattan Borough President and was elected Comptroller in 2013. So please join me in congratulating New York City Comptroller Scott M. Stringer.
For a kid growing up in Washington Heights back in the day, who got started in politics with my cousin Bella Abzug back in the day, and now to receive this award from Rainbow Push and Reverend Jackson is the highlight of my work as City Controller. Reverend, thank you very, very much. And to be here today with Mersha Baradaran, author of Color of Money, and Blair Smith and John Rogers, who are thought leaders in this country, and also to be here with Maxine Waters, I'm at her table, is a true honor. I just want to say one thing about this award. I want to thank the people in the Comptroller's office. I believe the next frontier in the area of social justice is in financial services. We can no longer accept that corporate America at the highest levels are individuals who look like me with better suits. These boards are too male, they're too pale, and quite frankly, they're too stale, and we have to change corporate America the way we're changing the United States Congress, and that falls on treasurers and controllers with large pension funds around the country. And that is what we have to focus on, so that a young woman of color who gets the best education, the best degrees, can walk into the biggest learning financial institution in the world and can get in that elevator and not get stuck in that elevator, but can get to the C-suite and become chair of the board, because this is about wealth creation in urban America and across the country. And that is why I'm going to put this on my desk, and every day when we think about money, we're also going to think about who gets it, who invests it, and who makes sure we as a country diversify this economy. I'm so honored, Reverend Jackson. I'm such an admirer of what you do, and I will keep this on my desk. Thank you very much. Thank you. This means everything. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we're very grateful for all the support we receive each year, but there are a few standouts that deserve special recognition. So this year we're focusing on 2 giants. David L. Casey is Vice President of Workforce Strategies and Chief Diversity Officer for CVS Health, the nation's largest pharmacy innovation company with $184 billion in revenue and more than 290,000 colleagues in 49 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and Brazil. With more than 17 years of experience, Mr. Casey is recognized as a national expert in strategic diversity management and has been published or cited in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, New York Times, The Atlantic, Diversity Inc., and Profiles in Diversity Journal. In his capacity at CVS Health, Mr. Casey is responsible for formulating and executing the company's diversity management, EEO, affirmative action, and workforce initiative strategies. He also serves as the president of the CVS Health Employee Relief Fund, a public charity designed to help CVS Health employees during unanticipated and unavoidable financial hardships and emergencies. Active in the community, Mr. Casey serves in an advisory and board capacity for several national organizations, including the American Lung Association and the National Association of African Americans in HR. Please join me in congratulating David L. Casey as he receives this coveted award of achievement at this 22nd annual Rainbow Push Wall Street Project Economic Summit.
I guess I'm saying a few words. I will be brief. I've never watched the show Stranger Things, but I understand the concept of the upside down being this whole notion of when things just aren't right. So me receiving an award from an icon like the Reverend Jesse Jackson just does not feel right. Because it's in his shadow and on his shoulders that I stand, and I'm forever grateful. So this too will sit on my desk and will be part of my motivation to continue the fight, both in the corporate boardroom and in the streets, and do my part to make sure that we reach the economic equality that we're all fighting for. So thank you.
Our next speaker really needs no introduction, but I am so thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker this afternoon. Congresswoman Maxine Waters is considered by many to be one of the most powerful women in American politics today. She has gained a reputation as a fearless and outspoken advocate for women, children, people of color, and the poor. Elected in November 2018 to her 15th term in the U.S. House of Representatives with more than 77% of the vote in the 43rd Congressional District of California, Congresswoman Waters represents a large part of South Central Los Angeles. She serves as the first woman and first African American to chair the House Committee on Financial Services. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Maxine Waters to the stage.
A woman of integrity, character, and ability, has a good mind, the courage of her convictions. From the poverty of St. Louis to the bright lights of California, beyond that to the powerful halls of the Congress. She makes us feel better with us fighting to get Aristide back to Haiti, Mandela free from prison in Robbins Island in South Africa, fighting for our 8488 campaign. She has always been, we thank her so much. She'll make America better and Wall Street more accountable. Brothers and sisters, I want to do some little gesture. Jackie, bring on Maxine. Say something.
First, let me thank all of you for being here today. It's a blessing to live long enough to see God deliver to his people a magnificent human being. A woman who has been a friend to the locked out, to the underserved, to the disenfranchised, all of her political life. I am so grateful and consider this, Reverend Jackson, a rare and unique privilege to introduce to you one of the finest, one of the most remarkable women in these United States and all of the world. My friend, my sister, my mentor, and a woman I love, Maxine Waters. Thank you.
Jacqueline Jackson, thank you so very, very much for that very generous introduction. I am honored and delighted to be here today with the entire Jackson family. I want you to know that this family is extremely special for and in this country. I want you to know that Reverend Jesse Jackson is a gem that came to us and provided the kind of leadership that required sacrifice. He has made some extraordinary sacrifices. But I want you to know that the entire family, Jesse Jr., Jonathan, Santia, Little Jackie, Yusef, they're all a family of strength and courage, committed to the proposition that our people can and must do better. Give them a big round of applause. I love them dearly, and Jacqueline Jackson is someone that I feel I can talk to about anything at any time. And sometimes that which we talk about has nothing to do with Jesse Jackson or anybody else. It's about us talking about us. Jackie, thank you so very much. I appreciate you and I love you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it was important for me to be here today to be with Reverend Jesse Jackson on the Wall Street Project. After 22 years of struggling, 22 years of educating, 22 years of trying to help Wall Street understand and to help our people understand that this democracy is supposedly about all of us and our ability to participate and to have the opportunity to gain wealth and to be prosperous and to be a part of what has been held out to us is a possibility. And so I'm delighted to be here today to say thank you to Reverend Jackson for your 22 years of focusing on what we need to do to build wealth in this country. Thank you for sticking with it when many people did not understand what you were even discussing. Thank you for traveling to Washington, D.C., time and time again, meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus and others, talking about what we should do, what we could do to open up these opportunities on Wall Street. And so with that, I have prepared a few thoughts today about some of these efforts and where I think we are and what I think we can do. The Rainbow Push Wall Street's project's work to promote inclusion and equal opportunity on Wall Street is absolutely critical. Its mission must be shared and pursued widely. I want to talk a minute about the wealth gap. At its core, the Wall Street Project is about building wealth. Reverend Jesse Jackson's work here is vital because there is a large wealth gap in our country between African Americans and other ethnic groups. The median wealth of white households is 10 times that of black households and 8 times that of Hispanic households. These lopsided wealth ratios are the largest since the government began punishing such data a quarter century ago. and roughly twice the size of the ratios that existed between these three groups for the 2 decades prior to the Great Recession that ended in 2009. Moreover, in 2016, lower-income white households had a net worth of $22,900 compared with only $5,000 for black households and $7,900 for Hispanic households in this income tier. These disparities rise when you factor gender into the equation. Across all racial and ethnic groups, the wealth gap between rich and poor has widened. In the United States, the share of wealth held by the richest 10% of households stands at 79%. The bottom 60% of U.S. households only hold 2.4% of household wealth. There's even greater gender wealth inequality when looking across the individual racial lines. Since the 2015 Asset Funders Network report, the median wealth of single white women was $15,640. In contrast, the median wealth for single black women and Latino women was $200 and $100, respectively. About 1 cent for every dollar of white women's wealth. The racial wealth gap isn't incidental. It has been perpetrated and widened precisely because of policy choices made by lawmakers and the systemic racism that plagues these policies. When this president pushes to cut, for example, community block grants to pay for billionaire tax cuts, a very clear statement is made. Fixing the wealth gap is not a national priority. Expanding it is. America has a problem when it comes to providing opportunities for people of color to build wealth, and Wall Street is emblematic of that problem. The asset management industry has about $70 trillion in assets under management, and in 2016 generated an estimated annual profit of $100 billion. In some respects, the racial wealth gap isn't a gap as the term applies to African Americans accessing wealth. It's a chasm. When we look at African American household wealth, we know that for every dollar whites have, African Americans have 1 dime. But on Wall Street, for every dollar white asset management firms manage, African American firms have 1 penny. So let's talk about this systemic exclusion of diverse asset managers, for example. In 2017, the Government Accountability Office released a report. I requested that report with Representative Meeks and Senator Booker on diverse asset managers and federal pension programs. The results of the report were certainly unsettling. The report found that even though there is $70 trillion in assets currently under management by asset management firms, minority and women-owned firms only manage 1% of that amount. The report noted the challenges minority and women-owned firms face in breaking this glass ceiling, including investors' preference for brand names or companies that they're familiar with, a false assumption that minority and women-owned firms aren't as good as managing funds as their majority-owned counterparts, and the old canard that minority and women-owned firms are too small to compete. Make no mistake, they are not the reasons why these firms aren't being included. These are excuses, and ladies and gentlemen, they're old and tired excuses. I want to tell you a little bit something about, the California pension funds that included emerging asset managers. And even though they still have a ways to go, we were able to make some accomplishments, which helped me to understand the possibilities. Of course, those excuses that I just referred to are ones that I encountered 30 years ago when I was in the California State Legislature, and I was working to get the two largest pension funds in my home state of California, that is CalSTRS and CalPERS, to open up management of their assets to diverse asset managers. I heard from diverse asset managers, an old friend like Mark Cazenave and Victor McFarland, about the challenges that they faced. Unfortunately, the pension funds were resistant to change. However, when I chaired the Ways and Means Subcommittee of number 1 in the California State Assembly, and CalSTRS and CalPERS were not yet self-funded, I used my power as chair of that subcommittee to hold up their budgets until they committed to uphold diversity in the management of their assets and their staffs. So, in 1991, CalPERS began using emerging asset managers. In 2000, CalPERS formally established its Emerging Asset Managers Program. Although California's passage of Proposition 209 in 1996 explicitly prohibits the use of race or ethnicity in selecting contractors for state programs, CalPERS has focused on what we then created as merging asset managers, which includes diverse asset management firms. CalPERS recently concluded a 5-year plan to strengthen and expand upon its investments with what is emerging asset management firms, including those owned by minorities and women. According to its last report, in this effort as of June 2016, CalPERS, the nation's largest pension fund, has invested $8 billion in emerging asset manager programs, and of this amount, $4.5 billion was invested with diverse asset managers. But that's just the beginning. There's a lot more that can be done. And so we need to look at this and understand the challenges facing diverse investment bankers, for example. Diverse investment bankers also have challenges. They were challenged in obtaining opportunities with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And this is why I worked on legislation, specifically Section 1319A of the Federal Housing Enterprises Financial Safety and Soundness Act of 1992 that was eventually signed into law. The legislation required Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to establish minority outreach programs to ensure the inclusion to the maximum extent possible of minority and women-owned businesses in the enterprise's contracts. This legislation led to the creation of Fannie Mae's Access and Freddie Mac's Golden Opportunities programs, which allowed minority and women-owned firms to underwrite the debt of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. In 2008, after monitoring the progress of these programs, I wrote more legislation, which was included in the Housing Economic Recovery Act of 2008, which further mandated the inclusion of all levels of business activities for minority and women-owned firms. According to some accounts, these programs have been somewhat helpful in increasing the participation of minority and women-owned businesses in underwriting this debt. And what role now have the big banks provided? What opportunities have they provided in diverse asset managers? I tell you a little bit about what we did in California with PERS and STRS, and also what we did with Fannie and Freddie, because I want to demonstrate somewhat what is possible and how we have gotten started with the whole idea of real diverse participation. However, I want you to understand that those are beginnings. After all of these years, we're still struggling to have the adequate kind of participation that's so well needed. A bit about the role of big banks in providing opportunities for diverse asset managers. Although the GAO report that I requested found that the Federal Retirement Investment Board could do much more to expand opportunities for diverse asset managers. The report didn't address the role big banks play in this space and the decided lack of opportunities that big banks provide for diverse asset managers. According to one estimate, the top 3 U.S. banks by asset size, J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo, have a combined total of $2.4 trillion in assets under management. Of that amount, $800 billion is externally managed, which simply means they contract that out. How much of that amount is managed by diverse asset managers is the question. We don't have all of the data yet, and I will be getting that data. I'm told by professionals in this space that it's probably less than 1%. These very same banks required a combined $940 billion in taxpayer support during the financial crisis and received an estimated $8.2 billion in tax relief from this president's recent tax scam in 2018 alone. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that it's 5%. The Knight Foundation, a private endowment that has studied the business case for diversity, now invests 22% of its holdings, or $500 million, with diverse asset managers. If the Knight Foundation can see the value and make change, why can't the big banks see it? Let me just stop for a moment and say this. I know that the big banks are involved in our communities in different ways. They support many of our activities. They're at our church banquets. They have foundations, and they contribute to foundations in various communities throughout this country. And they do the kinds of things that would help minorities believe and understand that the big banks are truly supportive of our communities. However, what I want to try to make clear today is I am not talking about 50 cents to the Boy Scouts or 25 cents to the Girl Scouts. I'm talking about real involvement. Thank you, big banks, for that you do with your foundations and otherwise. But now I just referred to the lack of diverse asset managers in all that you contract out. And so I want to know why you cannot contract with diverse firms, why you cannot contract with minority firms. The excuses are over. And frankly, I'm tired of seeing my friend, Reverend Jesse Jackson, struggle year in and year out, begging, pleading, asking, and not getting responded to in ways that are substantial. And I have been doing this for far too long. The gig is up. Today is it. I want this day to go down in honor of Reverend Jesse Jackson in ways that is described as this is a new day. This is a new day, and we're not simply begging. We're not simply pleading. A black woman has the gavel now. And I've lived too long, experienced too much, struggled too hard not to use it. They will hear the sound of my gavel all over the world. It's about time that our country, our democracy, our big businesses who benefit from all of us, by all of us investing in ways that we do. Even when we don't have very much money, we utilize these banks. They have what we put in the banks in our little savings. And yet, we find that there are some banks who do some outrageous things. Create accounts in consumers' names that they don't even know about. trying to make their investors believe that they are growing. And they're doing this with our money. We also have forced insurance by the banks when we don't need it, and we already have insurance, and we have to struggle to find out about these things. And of course, recently, even after 2008, when we went through the crisis, the recession in this country, almost a depression, we still have banks that are foreclosing on our properties and in our communities. Well, we're not going to continue to stand for that. We have lost wealth in our communities because most of our wealth was in our homes. We have struggled to buy homes because we have been taught, we have been told that if you're a real American in this country, you will strive to own a home. You will take out that mortgage. And so we signed on the dotted line for mortgages that we didn't understand, mortgages that we didn't think had clauses in them that would cause us to be foreclosed on because we would not be able to meet the interest rates that were going to be forced on us, different interest rates than when we first signed that mortgage. And so, as I talk about these big banks, if I sound a little bit agitated, I am. I am because we expect more, we want them to do more, and we're not begging for any give-outs or giveaways. We are talking about how do we participate as Americans in this economic way of doing business. And so, you know, we are being confronted day in and day out about whether or not we believe in capitalism. Of course we do. We have believed in it for far too long, but we have not been able to really participate in it. It is now time for all of them to understand that we're about the business of having you open up these opportunities. There are 186 diverse asset management firms in the United States, according to the aforementioned GAO report. These are 186 firms that are subjected to high barriers to entry. They have been forced to play by different rules, and that have had their work and accomplishments second-guessed and diminished. We all know that that's life as a person of color in this country. But when there are billions on the table, systems that are built to exclude us and devaluate us aren't just unfair, they are larcenous. And so, to even get their foot close to the door, not even in the door, but just close to it, diverse asset managers must have a long and successful track record, they say, of managing large pools of capital in an institutional environment. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one way that we are constantly excluded, not only by the big banks, but throughout major corporations in America. They say to us, you must have lengthy experience. You must have so much money that you are basically managing. You must have this and you must have that. But really, when we look closely at how business is done oftentimes, it has nothing to do with your experience. It has nothing to do with not only your experience, but what you have demonstrated by way of being able to garner huge sums of money to manage. Now, I am reminded of something that I'd like to bring to your attention. It does not really have to do with asset management, but it's a peep into ways that business is done that absolutely excludes us. There is a bank in Chicago, Federal Savings Bank. The CEO, I believe, is Steve Coca. Anybody ever heard of that? Steve Coca is the CEO of that bank, and he is the one that, because of connections, decided that he should be in this administration. And so he sent a list of the cabinet positions that he would like to hold. And he said he would take the Treasury, he would even take HUD, And so he had a friend, and his name was Manafort. Have you heard of that name? And so Manafort was his friend, and Manafort decided that he needed millions of dollars, even though he was carrying a lot of debt, was not capable of repaying anybody, and was known to walk away from debt. And so Mr. Manafort set out to get him a position. And he told him that he may not be able to get him Treasury or Hood, but he thought he could get him the Secretary of the Army. And so Manafort, as we know now, having had a good look at his emails and other kinds of efforts, set out to make him the Secretary of the Army. And I'm told, even though I don't know for sure, that he thought that he had it made. He even went over to the offices of the Secretary of the Army to look around, to see where he would sit and how he would manage having this great position. Now, it did not happen because they're all busted by now, as you know, in what they were attempting to do in so many ways, not simply collusion with Russia and Putin and the oligarchs of Russia, but also obstruction of justice. And it's been playing out before our very eyes. But just think about it. Manafort got over 16 million, I believe, from this bank. This was supposedly a community bank. Now, we can't get loans from banks. As a matter of fact, when this president shut down the government, and we discovered that people were living from paycheck to paycheck, and some people had to go to nonprofits to see if they could get food and assistance for their families. It was Wilbur Ross in his cabinet that said, why don't they just go to the bank and get a loan? He's a multi-billionaire. And I'm taking it that either Wilbur Ross does not understand, does not get it, he's too far removed from the realities of today, or he just doesn't give a damn. And so I'm saying to you, it's these inside connections that are working against our best efforts to try and get involved. It is the old boys club. It's what happens on the golf course. It's what happens in the private clubs, on and on and on. How are we to break through with that when we confront them and they tell us, oh, you don't have enough experience. You don't have enough money under management. We don't know who you are. You don't have enough background. And so I'm saying to you, we have to get over accepting those excuses. When somebody tells you you don't have enough experience, you tell them, I'm here with you to get it right now. When they tell you, asset managers, you haven't had enough money under management, tell them, you contract with me and I'll up the amount that I'll have under management. Do not walk away. Do not think something is wrong with you. Do not believe that somehow you have not arrived at a time and period in your life where you deserve to be taken seriously. It is time for us to realize that we don't have to take a back seat. We don't have to feel as if somehow we're not deserving. We're deserving of everything and anything that we're able to get because of our background, our education, and whatever experience we have. And if you think something's wrong with that, you ask, how did this president get to be president of the United States of America? And so, as we move forward and we continue to talk about what is happening with the banks, and I mentioned to you that we had done a great job by the banks when we bailed them out. And I want to tell you, I have something to make up for, because at the time that we realized that we could go into a depression, and the secretary at that time came to us with this proposal for bailing them out. And we asked what other things could be done to avoid going into a deep depression. We were told that there was basically nothing that could be done. In a matter of hours, this country was going under. And so there were some members of Congress who did not quite believe it, There were others who believed it. I believed it. I believed that we were at a time and point where we were about to go under because of what had been happening over the last few days with Lehman Brothers and some others. And so I convinced some members of the Black Caucus to go along with the vote to bail them out. And we were told that there would be a program also in the Treasurer's office that would deal with foreclosures, that would deal with the problems in our communities, and that never happened. So I owe all of them everything that I can do to correct the mistake that I made along with some others when we bailed out the bid banks, and it has not been reciprocal in any way or any fashion. Okay, I want to talk about the importance of seeding and asset allocators. Seeding by fund of funds and asset allocators like PAMCO and Grosvenor, Blueprint, M2, and many others for operations and or AUM, that is assets under management, can help diverse asset managers to launch their own firms and to build their own track records over time so that pension funds and or institutional investors can accept their qualifications as their own. Asset allocators and fund of funds aren't providing these funds to be nice or because it's the right thing to do. These asset allocators know the successful results of the long-standing research that has shown how diverse asset managers perform historically. Research has shown that in many cases, diverse asset managers perform as well, if not better, than majority-owned firms. For example, a 2017 report commissioned by the Knight Foundation, researchers found that diverse asset managers have returns that are comparable to those of non-diverse asset managers. Nevertheless, the results are consistent with the findings of a 2018 study by McKinsey & Company, which looked at the business case for diversity and inclusion. McKinsey found that companies with high levels of diversity at the executive level were 33% more likely to be leading their industry in terms of profitability. McKinsey also found that companies with low levels of diversity at the executive level were 29% less likely to be above average when it comes to profitability. In short, the business case for diversity is strong, and the time for excuses is over. Now, we talked a little bit about asset managers and a little bit about the banks. But I want you to know that it is important to have diversity in the boardroom. The buck stops at the top. It's important to have diversity in management. And when we take a look at the average corporation in America, the hiring stops well below the management level. And even though they have diversity officers, and others with the responsibility for inclusion and for diversity, somehow it does not get to the decision-making level where the input could help them to make better decisions. And so we've got to look at these corporations and these banks and their boardrooms. We've got to look at the flow charts and how the banks are organized and where the management levels are. And I intend to do just that. It's time for action. I've been engaged in this issue for 30 years. I'm one of the proud authors of Section 1116 of the Housing and Economic Recovery Act and Section 342 of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. Together, these provisions direct most of the federal financial services agency to create these offices of minority and women inclusion, which we refer to as OMWEs. The agencies include the Department of the Treasury, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, that is FDIC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, that is the OCC, the Federal Reserve, we refer to as the Fed, the Securities and Exchange Commission, that is the SEC, the National Credit Union Administration, NCUA, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, and the Federal Housing Agency, FHFA. The OMWEEs with these agencies have the important responsibility of overseeing all diversity matters in management, employment, and business activities at their agencies. The creation of these offices was a major step forward, but the laws that provide racial, ethnic, and gender equality are only as strong as the implementation and enforcement of these laws. As of yet, these OMWEEs that I created have not fulfilled their full potential to create change and progress, in part because of, they say, they didn't know that they were empowered as such. They didn't quite understand what was being put in their hands. And of course, when we've had the heads of these agencies come before our committee, we have the responsibility for oversight and investigation. Many of them didn't even know that they had an OMWEE department in their agencies. And the OMNI directors had never met with or did not even know who the head of the agencies were. Now that Democrats have taken the majority in the House, and again, I have the gavel of the House Financial Services Committee, promoting diversity and opening up doors for diverse firms are top priorities. I have, for the first time in the history of the Congress of the United States of America, created in my committee a full subcommittee on diversity and inclusion, which will be tackling issues of diversity facing financial services industry, including workforce diversity and the issues impacting diverse asset managers that I have discussed today. The subcommittee will be chaired by Representative Joyce Beatty, and she's going to take a serious, methodical look at this issue. Representative Beatty is a passionate, informed, and highly experienced in these issues of diversity. She has begun meeting with diverse asset managers and experts to hear their perspectives. Next week, the subcommittee will hold its first hearing on the workforce diversity in the financial services industry. Within the next few months, we will begin the process of gathering data from financial institutions on their diversity, including diversity of externally managed assets. We will hold hearings, we will meet with stockholders, including majority-owned firms, and we will come to an understanding of what the challenges are and what reasonable legislative remedies are needed in this space. And while I welcome input from stakeholders on this issue, there are at least 2 legislative ideas that I'm confident the committee will consider. Requiring disclosure of corporate board and C-suite diversity, and requiring disclosure of how much investment banks, pension funds, endowments, and others are spending with diverse firms. And so, again, I have the gavel, and I intend to use it. In the meantime, I call on companies, endowments, pension funds, and government entities to consider the following. Now, I have used the term emerging, and I used that 30 years ago when we created the emerging operation in California with PERS and STIRS. But I want you to know that it was considered at that time that they would be doing a great thing if they would create and set aside a certain amount of money that these emerging firms would have access to. And of course, that was a beginning, and we supported that. But when we talk about, or when the word emerging is used, and maybe it shouldn't be used so much anymore, and maybe we should avoid using the term, because while CalPERS must use the term because of the law in California, we believe, and we've been told, that the term emerging obscures the inequity facing diverse asset managers. Emerging implies a lack of size and expertise. The research I cited shows that many of the challenges faced by diverse firms are only partially related to size and tangentially related to expertise. Emerging also implies newness and unfamiliarity with the business of asset managers. These firms are not emerging. In many instances, they've been around for years, if not decades. Let's not insult their experiences by calling them emerging. Let's celebrate their perspective by calling them diverse, okay? Now, there's something else that many of you have been involved in religiously for a long time called supplier diversity. Just as with the term emerging, the term supplier diversity conjures up images of procurement offices and work orders for IT services, legal services, and construction work. Make no mistake, we need supplier diversity in these fields as well. But when we're talking about the management of billions of dollars in assets, if we conflate it with the purchase of widgets, we may be allowing companies that are good with working with diverse suppliers to allow those numbers to obscure their lack of work with diverse firms. I'm calling on all institutions to create a separate category specifically for their spending with diverse asset management firms. So, this is all we're saying. We got to the point where we had a well-organized effort around diversity of suppliers. And they meet, I think, once a year or so, and they give percentages about what has happened in these corporations that are involved with this kind of onlook at what they're doing. But it's not enough, even though we appreciate what is going on with diversity suppliers. We can't get stuck there so that we're only selling toilet paper. Everybody needs it, but we've got to be able to get into the big money. And so we want to make sure that we're not confused in what we're talking about. Yes, we continue with the diversity supplier efforts, but we want you to not go to these national conference and come away with, oh, it has improved by another 3%, a 5%, a 10%. Enough with the percentages that are produced. Give us the real data. Give us the information. Who are the firms? How much money have you spent with them? And so if you're going to do that in dealing with diverse supplier efforts, get the real information so that you don't keep getting played off in ways that we've been played off for so long. Can you do that? I know there's some of you in here are saying, I'm involved with supplier diversity, and I've been working with it for the last 20 years, and we have made some improvements. Prove it. And so I talked a little bit about increased board and C-suite diversity. Many companies like Amazon and Facebook are taking steps to diversify their boards, and while these are important steps, much more is needed. And while the conversation on board diversity has now entered the mainstream, diversity in the C-suite is just as important and is badly lacking. A GAO report that I and other lawmakers requested found that from 2007 to 2015, there was only a modest improvement in the overall representation of minorities in management positions in the financial services industry. And very troubling, representation of African Americans at the management level actually decreased, falling from 6.5% to 6.3%. Responsible companies should diversify, both on their boards and in the C-suite. Adopt the GAO recommendations to improve diversity in asset management. In its 2017 report, GAO recommended that the federal pension funds it studied should adopt 4 key practices in order to increase opportunities by diverse asset managers. The key practices were, number 1, top leadership commitment to diversity. 2, remove potential barriers to entry. 3, conduct outreach about opportunities and communicate priorities and expectations about including diverse firms to staff and consultants. I will be following up with these agencies administering these funds to check on their status in implementing these recommendations. However, I think these recommendations should also be implemented by the investment banks as well. I think that we should implement what is known as a Rooney Rule for the hiring of diverse asset management firms. We're all familiar with the Rooney Rule and its success in diversifying the coaching of staff on NFL teams. You've heard of that. I think Rooney Rule principles can also apply here. When investment banks are interviewing firms for asset management opportunities, they must commit to interview at least one diverse firm. They cannot go forward unless at least one firm is being interviewed. Diversity isn't just a buzzword, it's a reality. We must all accept the challenge of diversifying the ranks of companies across the country and working to close that wealth gap. So I thank you for having me here today, and I know that there's a lot of speculations about me and my new position and what I'm going to do. There are some lobbyists on K Street who are saying we don't have to worry about her. She is going to be spending all of her time investigating Trump and this administration and that which falls under my committee. Of course, I am looking at certain things that fall under my committee, having to do with the sanctions that we placed on Russia and the lack of implementation by Mr. Mnuchin, who is the Secretary of the Treasury. Of course, I'm looking at money laundering, and while I have hit the banks a little bit hard today, you haven't seen anything until you see what I'm going to do with Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank, known as the money laundering bank, who is the only bank in the world that will lend money to the Trump family and to the Trump organization because of the way that he's filed bankruptcies and he's not lived up to, repaying the debt that he's owed. And so Deutsche Bank is the only bank that would lend them money. And we've got to find out a lot about Deutsche Bank and its relationship to Trump and his activities and why the money was loaned, how it was loaned, whether or not it's being paid back. And so we're working on all of that. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for putting up with and enduring my rattling on all of the things that I'm concerned about and what I plan to do with this new position. But I want you to know I owe that to you. I owe that to our community. I owe that to Reverend Jackson. For the years that he has worked and the years that I have worked and the years that many of you have suffered because you have not been able to realize your real talent because you have been excluded, I owe this to you. And I want to tell you, at my age, I have no fear. At my age, even though I'm hit every day by the right-wingers, I have no fear. I can't be embarrassed. I can't be stopped. It is so important that I indicate to our young people that we stand for something, that we're going to fight for them to have opportunities. The millennials have said to us, I like it when you speak truth to power. I like it when you stand up to them. But what they're not saying is you haven't done it enough. It hasn't worked well for us. We have gone to school. We have graduated. We have done everything that you have told us to do, only to find we can't get a job. If we get a job, it is not worth going to work every day because of the pay that's offered to us. And we are disappointed in what we thought would be available to us when we come of age, when we graduate, and we're ready to start our careers. Millennials, I'm sorry about that. But one of the things I've talked to the banks about is I want you to create a millennial project. I want you to tell me how you're going to stop treating millennials the way you've treated us traditionally when you looked at our backgrounds and our credit records and how many jobs we've had and decided whether or not we were stable or not. And when you look at the millennials and you talk about stability and you say, well, they work 3 or 4 jobs. They're working for Lyft. They're working for Uber. And they're waiting tables. They're doing that because they can't make enough money at one job. And so I want you to create a product for them. I've told them that. I don't know what they're going to come back with, but of course, we're going to have the CEOs of all of the major banks in our committee. We're going to be asking them some questions. Many of them don't want to come, and many of them think that perhaps we're going to be too hard on them. But just as they are speculating about how we're going to relate to them, and the K Street lobbyists are speculating about how I'm going to spend my time, they don't really know. All they know is that I'm the new chair, and I've got the gavel, and they've got to come. And so when you come, you will find out. Thank you very much. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I would like to ask my husband, Ambassador Sidney Williams, to join us here on stage. As Jackie Jackson always tells me, that you know, you have a mate, you have a husband who, when they say that you're doing the wrong thing, you're not doing the right thing, he says, baby, I don't care what you do, it's the right thing. And so with that, I'd like him to join us and give him a big round of applause. Thank you. Thank you.
Let us momentarily, Maxine has to run, but I want us to stop for a moment to pray. Here's on Wall Street, a burial ground. Our ancestors cry out to the graves today for the sacrifice they made and for the price they paid, the groundwork established, shifting from Wall Street to Harlem, from enslavement to renting. We thank God for the sacrifices. And now for people like Maxine who embody their hopes and their dreams and answer their prayers, we're grateful. Amen. Now, one second. This is very important to us. Dr. King said after the dream speech, I'm going back south with the workers. We're going to have a Wall Street South conference in Atlanta, October 11th and 12th, Wall Street South. 55% of our people live in the South. We have a Wall Street South conference in October, dealing with pension funds, asset, and the whole thing she talked about today. On each of your tables, this is if you want to, there are rainbow. I want you to join Rainbow today as consumers or investors. On each of your tables, if you will do it, pick up your envelope, and when you finish it, bring it up here. We need you to join the movement for economic justice. On each of your tables, there are envelopes. Pick them up now. And Sister Maxine, we want to be good enough to you to let you go. Give her a big hand, please. Give her a big hand. Give her a big hand. Give her a big hand. Our Vice President, Todd Yeary. Todd Yeary, come up here, please. Our new Vice President, Todd Yeary, Reverend Todd Yeary, give him a big hand. Our Chief of Staff, John Mitchell. John Mitchell, come up here, please. John Mitchell. Our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. David Day, come up here, please, quickly. She's still talking about money, man. I saw John Rogers button the bust off his shirt today. Friends, we're in the conference now, today. But please, don't make me beg you, but you know I will. Virtual, pick up your envelopes now and fill it up and fill it out. Love you guys very much.